Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Mark Anthony, known as the Psychic Lawyer.
Hey, Peggy, thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate being here. It's an honor.
Well, thank you for coming on. I call it an equal playing field for all NDEers, from someone that's never been on before to famous NDEers like you. And so that's what I love, is just like I just give everybody an equal chance to come on. And it's all about the NDE. And they're all miraculous. And so where would you like to get started today?
Well, I think for people that may be watching this who don't know what an NDE is, I think it might be helpful to explain some background there. And in my latest book, The Afterlife Frequency, which was just released in October, and the Afterlife Frequency, it's available on sale worldwide. And what happened is, the reason I wrote this book, Peggy, is because I started seeing similarities between the different forms of spiritual contact, which include near-death experiences. Near-death experiences, shared death experiences, where more than one person gets caught up in the experience. Mediumship, because I'm a medium, and also people that are having deathbed visions and people in close proximity to that, and they pick up on what the person who's dying is seeing and experiencing. And I started looking at all of this and realizing that traditionally they have been treated as separate phenomena. You know, mediumship's over here, NDEs over here, shared death, deathbed, and they're not. They all involve energy transfer and frequency alignment. And so my book, The Afterlife Frequency, is the scientific proof of spiritual contact and how that awareness will change your life. And I explain all of this through quantum physics. Now, I know when people hear quantum physics and science, they're thinking you're going to be reading a dry technical treatise. I promise you that is not the case. I'm an attorney. I suffered through enough boring legal opinions and boring legal books in my life. I have never inflict that on anyone. The thing is, the concepts of quantum physics, once they're explained in a way anybody can understand it, they start making sense. You know, a near-death experience occurs, excuse me, when somebody dies and their consciousness, their perception, their spirit leaves the body and then goes to another realm. And there seems to be stages in this. Traditionally, somebody will die and they will get this floating sensation. And they may see themselves laying there and people around them. And then other times they'll go from that through a tunnel into a bright white light. They will encounter spirits of deceased loved ones. And then the stage beyond that, if it occurs, is an encounter with the divine. This vast light, love, intelligence, even the word God is too limiting here.
That's what I had.
Exactly. And then you come back and it's like you died and lived to tell about it. It's not like it. That's exactly what happened. Yeah. And so NDEs, near-death experiences, have been documented for thousands of years. The ancient Greeks were mystified by them. Plato even wrote about one in his book, The Republic. There was a soldier, his name was E-R. That's a pretty tough name, So Ur's in battle and gets killed. And so according to Greek custom, they would burn their heroes. So they put them on a funeral pyre, and just as they're getting ready to light it, he comes out of it. So begins to tell of this transcendent realm, how he went into a light and he met his deceased relatives and friends. And he talked about the light, the intelligence, and he also came back talking about we live several lifetimes. He was explaining reincarnation. Here's what's fascinating about this, Peggy. That wasn't the ancient Greek belief system. When he went through that tunnel into the light, he didn't encounter Zeus or Poseidon or Aphrodite or any of the Greek gods. He encountered loved ones who had passed and something even greater than that. The ancient Greeks did not believe in reincarnation, yet he was talking about it. I find this fascinating. And so throughout history, there have been accounts of these resurrections, people who die, then they resurrect. Nobody even knew what to call it. So then in the 1970s, Dr. Raymond Moody, a child prodigy, brilliant man. I love the guy.
Everybody does.
Yeah, he's not, you know what it is? He's like the uncle, the grandfather that everybody wishes they had, you know? He's wise, he's warm, he's compassionate, he's absolutely brilliant. And so he was a young scientist, and he applied the scientific method of objective observation to this phenomenon, and he came up with the term near-death experience, which makes sense. Because think of, all right, here we are, we're alive, and here's the other side, death. And an NDE is like you're attached to a rubber band. You're like, and you get right up to it, and then whoop, you come back. Whereas the spirits I communicate with, they didn't have that rubber band, and they continued on into what I have termed the afterlife frequency. So an NDE, near-death experience, is where somebody is between our material world dimension and the afterlife frequency. And that's why they encounter these different, like the spirits of their loved ones who've passed. And the cool thing about this, not only has it been documented for thousands of years, it doesn't matter gender, religion, socioeconomic status, culture, age, whether or not drugs or anesthesia were present, the type of death doesn't matter. There is a commonality between all of these. And now that we have a global database through the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, headed by Dr. Jeffrey Long, another awesome guy that everybody likes, and also the International Association of Near-Death Studies, the data correlates, whether it's from the US and Europe, Africa, Asia, Central and South America, Iran, a very conservative Islamic society, has a branch of IANS, the International Association of Near-Death Studies. Iranian doctors are reporting this. Chinese atheist doctors are reporting this. So this is really a fascinating phenomenon, and it helps us, Peggy, understand that our consciousness, who and what we are, survives physical death.
Yeah. See, I had a drowning at 5 years old, and then I had an adult NDE at 25, but my drowning was all out of body. I was a ghost kid, running around, doing stuff, flying, playing with kids. You didn't know I was there, going in and out of houses. And so that was unique for me, you know, now as I'm older, look back and think, I know what it's like to be a ghost. And then, but my second one, I was the tunnel, then in the white light, and God and Jesus and all that. And so it's very different. And so, you know, I know some people come on and say, this is my ND, so therefore this is what death is like. And I'm like, it's different for everybody. And you could be, you know, like 2 different ages was totally different. And I don't know why.
I have a theory. In my book, The Afterlife Frequency, I introduced a lot of new terminology. And one of the important concepts is the electromagnetic soul, the EMS. And that describes what we really are, which is pure consciousness, a spirit, a soul. That's what it's referred to in matters of faith, consciousness in psychology and physics. And every great belief system since ancient India, the Hindus, through Moses, Zoroaster, Jesus, Confucius, Lao Tzu, Muhammad, Native American spirituality, every belief system embraces that the soul, the who and what we are, pre-exists the body, comes into the body, and then lives on after the body dies. In other words, the brain doesn't create consciousness. And the field of neuroscience, which is the study of the human brain, has proven that the brain operates on an electromagnetic field with chemical impulses. But neuroscientists are completely at a loss of how to explain consciousness. Okay, they can't figure it out. Why? Because the brain doesn't create consciousness any more than your computer hard drive has created the Windows operating system that's using it, or Apple, depending on depending on what faith you are, either the Apple Church or the Windows Church. And so we know from the laws of thermodynamics in physics that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. So I developed the term, the EMS, the electromagnetic soul, to explain who and what we truly are, which is pure consciousness, a soul that is eternal electromagnetic energy. And so this also explains the different forms of spirit communication. Now, the brain is our computer hard drive, and the brain, Peggy, is designed for finite perception. The EMS is infinite. Okay, so when we die, think of your soul as a drop of water, and it leaves the brain, and then it plunges into the eternal sea of souls, which I call the collective consciousness. But with an NDE, you're just about to plunge and you get pulled back. So what's happening is, see, we're in this material world so that we can experience things that we can't as an immortal living being. That's why we grow old, we suffer physical disabilities, we lose people. Personally, I could do without a lot of the pain and sorrow, but there is a reason why we go through all of this. So the brain is geared specifically for finite perception. Why? Because we can experience things in this world that you can't when you're pure energy. Energy doesn't get old, it doesn't get sick, it doesn't die. All right, so there appears to be a benefit to our going through this. And so the brain, geared for finite perception, as a soul, an EMS, is during a near-death experience, moving from the body, transitioning from a finite form of perception to the infinite. We're still looking at things through that finite filter. That is why Christians, when they encounter the white light, the universal intelligence, will say, I met Jesus. Buddhists will say, I met Buddha. Hindus, I met Shiva or Vishnu. The Japanese people, I met Amaterasu. Okay, and because we're still operating on that. And what that is, and that's perfectly okay, because what's happening is it's easier for you and I to relate to God as the person Jesus than it is this vast energy field that permeates everything for infinity, because in this finite mindset, we simply can't understand that. So that's where the cultural differences may come in when you're interfacing with deities. Because I've heard, cases like Todd Burpo, and of course his father is an evangelical minister, so he said, oh, well, everything was according to the book of Corinthians. Yeah, well, you talk to Hindus and that doesn't happen. You talk to atheists. And it's funny because as Nancy Evans Bush, President Emeritus of IANDS, said that most near-death experiencers don't think there's a God, they know. Right. And it's funny because when you come out of an NDE, if you're an atheist, you're not afterwards, because you begin to realize that we're part of something larger. So that's my theory, why there are cultural differences. See, when you were a child, you went into the light and you experienced the vast intelligence. Then years later, you encountered Jesus. Well, you were encountering the same intelligence. It's just that later in life, you were interpreting the infinity through the loving, kind, compassion entity that we know as Jesus.
At 5, I heard the voices telling me things. But at 25, I saw outline in the bright white light, and the one sitting up front and center, I said, that has to be God. That was my understanding. And then when I saw a figure that looked like the back of a man, I said, that has to be Jesus. So, you talk about different religions, they may say, well, that has to be whoever that they perceive would be there.
Right. Because, and here's the thing, I don't want to, my comments are not designed or intended to offend anybody's religious beliefs. I believe in God. All right. But there's an old Hindu saying that there are many paths to the top of the mountain. The only person on the wrong path is the one running around the mountain telling everyone else their path is wrong. Because I hear so many people, there's one and only way. Okay. If you want to believe that, that's fine. But I've studied theology my entire life. I'm known as the psychic lawyer, but I'm also known as the psychic explorer because I spent a good deal of my life traveling to spiritual and mystical locations around the world. That's what I enjoy doing. And I study theology, philosophy, archaeology, and I encountered many different belief systems. And you start to see that once you remove the cultural differences, they're all talking about the same thing. They're all talking about the light. And it's fascinating that, in your NDE, in both cases, you encountered light, correct?
No, not in the drowning.
Not in the drowning. All right.
No. I hovered over the pond and
Okay.
I looked around and a female voice in front of me, I didn't see her, said, "Don't go yet. If they find you soon, you might go back." And I got bored waiting. And so I thought, my first thought was go back. What is she talking about? That's not how death works. That was fine. And so I got bored and I thought, well, I don't have to listen to anybody anymore. I don't have to eat my vegetables. I don't have to go in at bedtime. I'm a ghost. So all I knew from ghosts is what I'd seen on TV, like Casper the Friendly Ghost. And I thought, well, I'm gonna go find other kids to play with. Apparently, other kids have died too. And so I went exploring. I went into a house, stood at the doorway as a child, and there was a bunch of old people sitting around a table talking, and the spirits. And they turned and looked at me. And the man at the head of the table said, because I asked him, I said, "Where can I find kids to play with?" And he said, "Go to graveyards." And so I went the other direction. I thought, well, I know where some graveyards are down this other town. And as I'm flying over the highway, I see two boys walking along the highway, and I tried talking to them, and they were ignoring me. And I realized, it's because I'm dead. But I started telepathically talking to the youngest one. And I was like, "Where are you going? What are you doing? Huh? What are you doing? Huh?" Bugging him. And so he started answering me. He says, "Oh, we're in a hurry. We've been fishing. They're carrying buckets and poles, and we got to hurry and get back." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then I flew down the highway. And I saw a group of kids playing in the yard, and I was running around playing ball with them. And I realized, gosh, this is no fun. They don't realize I'm here. So in and out of houses, looking around and in and out of houses towards my grandma's house. And then I woke up choking up water over my brother's back. So there's a place there that I have no memory of, from that to waking up.
How long between the time you were drowning and the time you were rescued? What was the period of time?
I don't know.
Was it 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour?
All I know is while I was choking underwater, I left my body, was suddenly at the kitchen at the house right up the hill from the pond,
Right.
And watching my mom and sister getting stuff to bring down to the pond. Later, I looked down at the pond, and my mom and sister was sitting on a bed sheet, putting suntan lotion on their arms and legs, talking. So, and then later I woke up, and my brother was still doing laps in the pond. When I woke up, they were walking up the hill. My brother was carrying me over his shoulder. I remember the Johnny Rafford happened. I remember that night. I remember some spiritual things right after that, but I must have just pushed it away because I didn't remember it until after my second NDE, a couple of months later. I was sitting looking up the night sky one night, and this was like a big movie screen opened up, and it just showed it to me front to back, like I was watching it. And I went to my mom, and I was like, "Did I drown when I was little?" She says, "Yeah, you did." And so I kept bugging her. "What can you tell me? How did they find me?" And first she didn't remember. Then she said, "I remember now." She said she noticed I was gone. They had been sitting there a while, her and my sister. And she asked my brother, "Where's she at? Where did you see her last? Go to where you saw her last." And he kept diving down until he found me and pulled me up. And then he was carrying my dead body. So, I'm guessing at least 20 minutes.
Yeah, because you think about how much you encountered, how much you did in that time. And see, that ties into my EMS theory. You were pure energy and you were moving so quickly. Look at all those things. You saw your mom, your sister, these old folks. You talked to these two kids. You were zipping all over the place. And I find that that's really, really fascinating. And there's a number of NDEs that are like yours. Like my father had one when he was 16 and he was in a car accident. And he said, the next thing he knows, he's floating over the car and he says, "I feel great. I think I'm dead." He said, because he just felt wonderful. And he said there was this voice. He said he started to see some light, and there was a voice, and the voice said, you have to go back. And he said the next thing he knows, he's on the ground. He goes, Mark, it hurt like hell. He said people were working on him like, oh my God, let's get him, see if we can get him breathing again. And then he had another NDE, had to be about 15 years after that. He had gone into the Navy. He was a Navy SEAL, and this is afterwards. He was a diver, and he was off the coast of New Jersey. He was part of a dive club there, and he was about 150 feet deep, and that's pretty darn deep. And his regulator jammed, and he started sucking water. Now, in those days, when your regulator jammed, that was it. There was no backup. There was no, emergency air supply. And he said that he felt that he was floating, like not underwater, but he saw the light, and he heard the voice, and the voice said, Earl, that was his name, it's not your time. And he said the next thing he knew, he was choking, and somehow the regulator cleared. He goes, Mark, I never figured out how that regulator cleared itself. It shouldn't have. He goes, I should have died then. And so his NDE was very similar to yours. He was like right on that cusp. So you were in the first stages of the transition, and you were still observing things from the finite perception before you got into, but see, in your older one, you got right up, you went through the stages till you got where you were encountering the divine and interpreting this as Jesus and God, which for all intents and purposes, it was,
right.
or they were.
Yeah, nobody can tell me different, let's just.
Well, no, that's your
right.
experience. And here's the thing, people say, oh, you're making this stuff up. Why would you make that up?
I would go to hell if I made that up. If I lied about God, if I lied about what heaven is, I think I would burn in hell for eternity. I really do. And if anybody would make up that stuff, I would be afraid to have your judgment day.
Yeah. You talk to near-death experiencers, very few of them become rich and famous because of it. Okay. You may become well-known and people want to know your story. But the thing is, you talk to a lot of NDEers, and they have lifelong repercussions. For many people, it makes them more spiritual, but for many people, it creates, it's very hard for them trying to reintegrate into their family, into society, because people think that they're crazy, or they're making it up, or there's something wrong with them in some way. And you probably experienced some of that. You tell people this and they give you this look like, but that's also assuming that everything is limited to our ability to perceive, our 5 physical senses of sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. And certainly that's not the case. You know that. I know that. People who study science know that. For the longest time, people believed that only the visible, what is observable, existed. But now we know from the realm of quantum physics that there's molecules, there's atoms. Atoms are made of electrons, protons, and neutrons, which in turn are made of quanta. So everything at the most basic level is a particle of quanta, which is electromagnetic energy. So that means, Peggy, that you are electromagnetic energy, but so is the chair you're sitting in. So are the radio waves the show's being broadcast on. So is the air we're breathing, the light we're seeing, because everything on the subatomic level is electromagnetic energy, which vibrates at different frequencies. And because we're alive, we're vibrating at a higher frequency than the chair we're sitting in. Think of the soul, or think of energy as water, okay? When water's frozen, so think of that as the chair you're sitting in, it's a lump of ice. We're water, okay? We're moving around, we got a higher vibration, higher frequency, and then when we ascend to as a spirit, we become steam, all right? So I think it's easy for people when they start thinking of energy like that. Okay, water can exist in different states, so does energy. And so when we physically die, that energy field in our brain, which, you can call the soul, the spirit, the consciousness, I refer to as the electromagnetic soul, transfers its frequency from a lower, slower vibration to a higher one. So, we're like a car. And when the car stops functioning, we get out and we move on.
Right. Yeah. And I've heard a lot of NDErs say they look back at their body and it didn't care anything about it and didn't want to go back in it.
I get that in spirit communication. I'm a medium, and I've conducted about 15,000 readings, and that means hundreds of thousands of spirits, because they're never alone. Spirits always show up in a group and they're always so happy, and they're like, why are you guys so happy? We're pure energy. Well, think about it. Energy doesn't get sick, it doesn't get old, it doesn't die. Your NDE as a child was pretty good proof of that. You got bored. You're zipping around, checking stuff out. You're inquisitive, and think of the speeds that you were moving at. All right, that's miraculous. Well, that's what it is to be a spirit, and it's really fascinating when we begin to understand that there's so much more beyond this world.
Yeah, I remember going right in front of a billboard, and I could still tell you what that billboard looked like. And for the longest time when I was a kid, I hated that billboard. I would see that billboard and I would just focus on it. Like, why do I hate that billboard so much? And that's just like, I was like right in front of it. And I didn't understand why I felt I had been right in front of it. But then, later I started remembering. I was like, well, because you were. That's where I was flying down the highway.
See, isn't that interesting? And that's, see, the critics say that near-death experiences are strictly a subjective experience. All right, that you can't prove it. But an objective experience is where more than one person has the NDE or is able to experience it. And where we're seeing this as an NDE researcher is in deathbed visions, which become shared death experiences. Now, a deathbed vision, a DBV, is where somebody is dying, and that person may start talking about seeing their deceased loved ones in spirit. All right. Well, psychologists and neuroscientists, that's a deathbed vision. That is a side effect of the dying brain. It's a hallucination. But when family members, close friends, and then other people in close physical proximity to the person dying, hospice workers, other healthcare workers, they start seeing these spirits too. They start picking up on it. And then there's the life review, which a lot of people have during their NDE, where your proverbial life flashes before your eyes. And when people who are not in imminent danger of dying are experiencing this as well, what's happening is, as the person is dying, their electromagnetic soul, energy is beginning to expand as the brain of that person is no longer able to handle that amount of energy. So that vibration then starts interfacing with the EMSs of the people in close proximity, and they get caught up in this frequency link. So now they're seeing spirits of this person's deceased loved one, and then they're experiencing what that person is seeing. And this too is being widely reported worldwide. And there have been accounts of shared death experiences, deathbed visions for thousands of years. There's even paintings of them. Of people standing around a bed and they're all looking at an angel. Now, where do you think that idea came from? So this is really a major milestone in going from subjective to an objective experience. And Dr. Moody has done a lot of work with this. I've done a lot of work with this. I've been called to bedsides of people that have been dying. The family wants me there, because it helps them, and it helps to reassure the person who's dying. And I was at the bedside of this guy, and he had gone unconscious, and I held his hand, and all of a sudden I saw this wave hit a ship, and I saw the bow of the ship go up in the air and then hit the water, and I saw bullets flying everywhere. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I felt like I was on a machine gun, and I saw this one plane, and I realized it was a Japanese Zero. So this was something out of World War II. And I could see him shooting, and he killed the pilot. And all of a sudden the pilot came forward and said, I forgive you. And I could get this sense of relief. And I realized that this old man was once a 19-year-old sailor. He was in the Battle of Okinawa, and he killed this Japanese pilot who was trying to kill him and everybody on his ship. But he carried that guilt his entire life. And finally, after all these years, the spirit of this pilot forgave him, and I sensed this incredible relief. And then the link was broken. And I explained this to the family, and they said, "Oh my God, he always talked about how he felt bad about that." And it was as if that occurred at the right time and enabled him to die, which he did 36 hours later. And, I have observed this so many times. And, when people say, "Oh, you're making it up," and all this. And, once again, why would I make this up? I'm a member of the Florida Bar, the Washington, D.C. Bar, and the United States Supreme Court Bar. They frown very heavily on fraud.
And your character's everything, your reputation.
It does, and going public being a medium, oh my Lord, was I subjected to the nastiest, cruelest attacks, and so I still appear on TV and radio as a legal analyst, but my time is now devoted strictly to my work with spirituality and as a medium. And helping people during the transition is such a great responsibility. I received a call from this woman that I have known since I've been a child. And she said, "Mark, my son's on life support, and they want us to remove his life support." And I'm like, "Oh my God." And she goes, "Can you do anything? Can you contact my parents?" She goes, I can't. I just can't do this." And all of a sudden I said, "Well, there's a female coming through," and that was her mother. And she said, "And there's somebody here." And I started describing, and she goes, "Oh, that's Mikey." So her son was on life support, but there was no brain activity, but his soul was very well alive, and he was communicating to me. And he said, "You're not ready, Mom. You'll know when you're able to do it. Don't let anyone pressure you." And then, and the whole family was around the phone. And this is all during COVID. So, they didn't want me to come to the hospital, but we're talking to them. And I said, "He's talking about Giorgio and Greggy." Now, this young man, they called him Mikey. His father's name was Michael. Instead of calling him Michael Jr., they called him Mikey. And I go, "Giorgio and Greggy." And something about the planet Mars. He said, "You're all going to see Mars and remember me." I said, "I don't know what this means." And the father goes, "Oh my God." He goes, "It was a joke between he and I. He used to tease me and call me Giorgio." Okay. Now, see, this is how Spirit was validating that this was him. I didn't know this. I mean, I hadn't seen this woman's name was Mary. I hadn't seen her in probably 10 years. I didn't know this. And she goes, "Okay. All right. Thanks, Mark." Well, she called me a week later and she said, "So Mark, we made the decision. I got to the point where I was going to make the decision." And so there we were at his hospital room. And just as we were about to remove life support, this young man walked into the room. It was a foster child that we took care of when he was a teenager. We called him Greggy. And it was like, oh my God. So he called his father by Giorgio and he said Greggy, and Greggy showed up precisely when they removed life support. And then she called me a week after that. She said, "Mark," she said, "the whole family, we were in the backyard last night. We were having a barbecue and we were talking about Mikey. And my other son said, 'Hey, look, there's Mars. It's really bright tonight.'" And then everybody looked at each other and said, "He said we talk about him and see Mars." And, it's what a beautiful gift. I mean, obviously no parent should ever have to go through that. The loss of a child is so horrible, but her son gave her such a beautiful gift to let him know. So people ask, well, how can a spirit see future events? Now, earlier when we were talking about the quantum physicists, and this includes Albert Einstein, Stephen Hawking, Max Planck, Max Tegmark, and I could go on and on and on the quantum level, on the electromagnetic level, they say that time doesn't exist because everything's energy. You know, we hear that a lot. And we get this in NDEs, you know, time doesn't exist. Well, we think it does. Why? We're born, we grow old, we die. So you know, like when we're in school and they say draw a timeline, and you go up to the board and you make a dot, and then you draw like from left to right in one direction. It's like, you know, the Roman Empire was here, and then it went to the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, you know, like time moves in a linear fashion. Well, it doesn't. You know, we think it does because, you know, born, grow old, and die. So on the quantum level, spirits are able to perceive things that you and I would call the future. And in this particular instance, he validated that it was him by giving the nickname that he joked his father with. He gave the name Greggy, who showed up precisely when they were going to terminate life support. And then he said, "You'll see Mars and think of me." And that's exactly what happened, because he was able to perceive that. And the reason I'm saying all this, and why does this tie into an NDE? This goes back to your NDE, Peggy. As a little girl, your spirit was zipping all over the place at light speed, seeing all these things. That's why I was curious. Some of the investigators still, you know, how long did it happen? Well, maybe 20 minutes. Well, that's a heck of a lot of traveling you did in 20 minutes. You know, to your mom, to these other place, to the billboard, you know, all over. And it's the same principle, is that you were pure energy. You were still dealing with the finite consciousness because you were not supposed to die then. All right, that was not going to happen.
Right.
Peggy was supposed to go on, and Peggy's supposed to be doing what she's doing now. And so it's fascinating when we study these phenomenon, we see how quickly spirits are able to move and acquire and assimilate information.
My second NDE, I was told it was my time. And I was throwing a fit. I want to go back and raise my little boys. And so I pleaded with God. I said, you can look into the future. I said, you're omniscient. You can look in the future. If you can show me my boys would be better off without me for whatever reason, I agree to stay. But if not, I beg to return. And that's when I saw Jesus appear from behind. And I went beside him, a physical me. I'm this invisible nothing, you know, I'm all me, but I can't see me. And so I see me go over and join him, Jesus from behind. And we drop out of the floor of heaven, and instantly we're above our trailer we lived in at the time. And it wasn't too far in the future because my boys look the same age. And my middle son, Jeremy's very sensitive. And he told his older brother, Matthew, he says, I don't care that you say mom has died. I want her back, and I want her back right now. And I felt his pain so bad, I retracted. And then I was back in heaven, pleading, you know, crying, sobbing. But so I experienced that forward in time that you're talking about.
Right. See, there you go. It's time is a human construct. And once again, I'm not crashing on us. Why wouldn't we think time exists? You know, because we are finite beings, but beyond our finite existence is the infinite. Always was, always will be.
Yeah. And I experienced some of the things you were talking about, but mine was after my ex-mother-in-law passed. She'd been gone in the hospital for about 30 minutes after the family went in, saw her. Then I was ex-daughter-in-law by then, and my ex told me I could go in and see his mom now. And when I went in, I put my hand on her arm, and as soon as I did, it was like picking up the phone, and she's talking. But what I could never understand is she was telling me to bring her back. And I'm thinking, I can't do that. She was scared. She wasn't going on. She was begging me to bring her back. And I said, isn't Pappy there? That's her husband that passed. I said, isn't Pappy there? Your parents, your siblings, everybody that's passed, aren't they there? Like, isn't anybody there for you? Go find them. You got to go. Said you fell and broke your hip. You had a major heart attack. There's nothing here for you but pain. You had a beautiful death. All 12 of her kids was around her singing the Catholic prayers and songs and things. And I said, there's nothing here for you. You got to go back. And she wanted me to bring her back. And I'm thinking, I can't bring her back. I'm not a miracle worker. I mean, she was dead like a half hour. You know, I don't bring the dead back. But I guess I was the only one that was listening that she could talk to. And it was startling. And when I put my hand off her arm, it was like hanging up the phone on her. And it was very strange.
Well, I mean, and I may be incorrect in my interpretation, perhaps, because whenever dealing with spirit communication, we have to be careful about jumping to conclusions. Could it be that bring me back may have meant convey that message, what you just did? In other words, make sure that people remember her, make sure that they know that she didn't disintegrate, that she's an immortal living spirit. So we always have to be careful how we interpret things. Now, It sounds like you had a pretty direct connect. So
strong.
That may have been it, but, bring me back may have been make sure people are aware of this as well. Because who better, Peggy? Who else out of all the people in your family, who would have understood? You. Yeah. All right. So you were right where you were supposed to be. You were at the right place at the right time. And let me tell you, it's very, very overwhelming. It's like, the story of Jesus at the Garden of Gethsemane. All right. He knows what's coming. And it's like, spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Now, he didn't want to do it, but he had to do it. Okay. Now, I know that's an extreme example, but that's very similar. I like something that Mother Teresa said. She said that God never gives me anything that I can't handle, but I really wish God didn't trust me so much.
Yeah. Well, she started popping in at night after that, and it wasn't strong like that. It was just suddenly I knew she was at the foot of my bed. And after a couple of nights, I thought, what am I afraid of? Like, you're afraid of a ghost, Like, what am I afraid of? She's not going to hurt me. And so I said, come on, Mary. And went to the living room and sat in the recliner, and I got out my family Bible, I got a pen, and I said, now, whatever it is you're going to tell me, I'm going to write it down so I'll never forget. And what she did was, and I've noticed later, I have experienced it just in that communication that way before. Instead of talking, they give you a memory. You're suddenly in this memory, and it's so real, like you're reliving it. And I was in this memory when I was a young mother, and I went down, visited her and her husband, and Pappy, her husband. He said to me when I walked in, he said, "You're our Loretta." Well, Loretta is their stillborn daughter that I think she died like April and I was born in February, before. And I'm like, what? I'm not sure. They've never said anything weird like that to me before. I'm like, what? And he says, yeah. He says, me and Mommy talked about it. So he called his wife. Me and Mommy talked about it, and you're our Loretta. And I looked over her and she nodded her head, yes. And I scoffed at him, walked out. That memory was brought back to me in that moment that I'm standing here saying, okay, tell me what you have to say. And I thought, I really don't think I'm their reincarnated Loretta or anything like that. But I think it was their way of saying, we love you. Because what he continued to say then was, you look like you could be one of our kids. We love you like a daughter. You are our Loretta. And I think what they meant was I took the place of losing their daughter.
You were the daughter they didn't have, or they never had in that context. It's an interesting thought, though. Maybe you were reincarnated Loretta, and maybe you're not. But, once again, energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another, and most people that have NDEs talk about reincarnation, which also I don't believe violates scripture, because in the early Christian era, reincarnation was part of Christian beliefs. Origen of Alexandria was a great theologian, and he lived in Alexandria, Egypt in the 4th century. Now, this is before the rise of Islam, so the entire Mediterranean world, and which included Egypt, was part of the Roman Empire, and Christianity had become the de facto religion of the empire. The gods living on Mount Olympus, nobody was believing that anymore. They had all were believing in Christianity. And then at the 5th Ecumenical Council, 3 centuries later, in I think it was 525 AD or thereabouts, the Emperor Justinian, they redid the Bible. Each ecumenical council, they edited the Bible, and reincarnation was declared to be heresy. Well, here's what's fascinating. couple passages got through the censors, because if you look at the Transfiguration, where Jesus takes a select group of disciples to the top of this mountain, and all of a sudden he glows white, and mist appears around him, and the spirits of Elijah and Moses. This is really fascinating because talk about mediumship. Apparently, Jesus was the super duper medium because he brought forth Moses, the lawgiver, Elijah, the law enforcer. All right. So understandably, the apostles are totally freaked out. Okay. And then afterwards, they're talking, and Jesus said, "Who do you say that I am?" And the response was, "Some say that you are the prophet Elijah. Others say that you are John the Baptist returned." Now, John the Baptist was Jesus's cousin who was executed by order of, I think it was Herod Antipas, which is Herod the Great's son. I've done a whole study on the Herodian line. Talk about a dysfunctional family. But at any rate, and Jesus said to them, "Elijah has returned, but they did not recognize him, for he appeared as John the Baptist." Whoa! Elijah lived 800 years before Jesus and his cousin John the Baptist. That sounds like reincarnation to me. In other words, yeah, Elijah did come back, except this time he was John the Baptist. I'm not, John was. Isn't that interesting? And
sometimes I wonder if we come back as a tribe, not as, reincarnated, I was this before and now I'm this, but maybe more come back with me. And, maybe I'll go into my granddaughter's spirit, to help her along life or something, be her guardian angel. And maybe we're all like these guardian angels within a body. Maybe we're not just one spirit. Because you get to know anybody well enough, they have multiple personalities. I mean, not like the mental health diagnosis, but we all have these different personalities, and they can be so different from me. I notice it in my husband. I notice anybody that I get to know well. They're a different person. I can tell exactly when they appear and when they're gone. And, oh, here that one is again. And it just seems like with everybody.
That's an interesting thought. In my family, it usually coincides with how low their blood sugar is.
That could be true, too.
The nicer ones are around after they've had a sandwich.
Yes. Good night's sleep.
Well, that's I'm enjoying this conversation, because instead of just, I go through in depth in the afterlife frequency. My book's been endorsed by the top NDE researchers in the world, like Dr. Bruce Grayson, Dr. Jeffrey Long, Dr. Dean Radin, Dr. Gary Schwartz wrote the foreword for the book. And then also Colonel Dr. John Alexander, Nancy Evans Bush, PMH Atwater. And so I go very deeply into near-death experiences, including the one I had when I was 4. And I'm going to save that story for the book.
Okay.
All right. So if people want to find out, because the reason is something happened when I was 4. I had this NDE and I received a message there that it took me years to understand what it meant. And that's another thing that happens in NDEs. See, we live in this immediate gratification society. You need an answer, you pull out your cell phone and ask it. You want this, oh, we got to order it. What do you mean? Where everyone's freaking out about supply chain. Oh my gosh, you may have to wait, another 2 weeks before your, new Xbox arrives or whatever it is. That's not how spirit communication works. Messages will come to you, and it may take hours, days, weeks, even longer. The example that I gave with Giorgio Greggio and seeing Mars. I was doing a reading for this couple, this husband and wife, but I did them separately. The wife did her reading, and then like 2 or 3 weeks later, her husband. And I received, that was probably almost a year ago that I did the reading. And the husband just sent me an email. He's a writer. And he wrote this blog, and he said, during both my wife's reading and my reading, you kept saying that the spirits of our loved ones said that there's a major problem with the electricity at our house where the power lines connect with the house. He said, both of us blew that off as, oh, that was just an incorrect, that was a complete miss. Said, well, about 3 months after that, we noticed all of a sudden we're getting brownouts and the lights are flickering. We contact the power company. They said, our lines are fine. It appears to be where it's at the junction going into your house. So we called a trusted electrician, and he came and he says, oh my God, it's arcing in here and you're on the verge of an electrical fire. Okay. Now, he said, how could you possibly know that? And, to which my response is, I don't. But the spirits of your loved ones, the divine power we call God, does. And this is one of the key concepts in the new book, Spirit Intervention, where spirits will intervene to head off at the pass a potentially dangerous person, place, or condition. In this case, they were saying, you're going to have an electrical fire, do something about it. And that's one of the benefits of spirit communication. A lot of people these days, they say that, oh, spirits have guided me to start an insurrection or to tell these idiots to put on bomb vests and blow up, people and all that. That has nothing to do with God, nothing to do with spirituality.
It's ego.
Ego, edging God out. Very good. All right. High five. High five. And that's what that is. And there's people that have, they're narcissists, they're sociopaths, they're predators. And what they're doing is they're looking for a moral justification to commit acts of anger, bigotry, hatred, and violence. And when somebody says, I'm being spiritually driven to do those things, those have nothing to do with spirituality or the divine. Messages from spirits are about love, healing, resolution, peace, protection.
Yeah.
If you look at that, protection, their loved ones didn't want them burning to death in a fire. Mikey came through, he wanted his mother to find peace and gave them these messages. That's when we know that these are messages from spirits, because many of the messages that we receive in near-death experiences, what's interesting is they're short and sweet and to the point, but boy, did they take a long time to unfold to where we fully understand what it means.
When I was a 20-year-old mother, I kept having dreams like several nights in a row, and I'd wake up in a panic. And every night it was the same, that there was a fire in our trailer between the master bedroom and our baby's bedroom. And I kept telling my husband, he kept ignoring me. And then my husband's sister came and her husband to visit, and the guys was outside, and I told her. And as I was telling her, because she was blowing me off too, but as the guys walked in, my brother-in-law, her husband, he heard me, and he told my husband, he said, well, let's go check out the trailer. And they went underneath the trailer, and here they come back in, their eyes was big as saucers. And they said a fire had been starting in the exact spot where I was dreaming, because the bathroom was between the two bedrooms, and I had a washer in the bathroom, and it was putting out a fire that was starting. What was happening was the heat tape to protect the water lines was catching the wood beam on fire in the trailer, and it was black, but because of the leak of the washer, it was putting it out. He's eventually would have caught on fire exactly where I was dreaming. And things like that I just never forgot. It's just like so thankful that whatever that is and how that happens, and that he happened to be walking through the door, somebody that would hear me and check it out as I was talking about it.
Yeah, see, there you go. There's spirit intervention. And see, you exhibit a lot of psychic ability, which is a very typical side effect of people who have had near-death experiences. And see, for you had your first NDE when you were 5, so this has been part of your makeup for a very long time. So and one of the key components of my new book is the RAFT technique. And this applies to interpreting NDEs as well. It teaches you how to recognize a sign from a spirit, accept the contact as real, feel it without overthinking it. All right, that's where people go wrong, don't we? You get to that point, oh, well, it must be coincidence. Oh, it's me, my imagination, I'm making up. But then you got to trust the message. And trusting is peace, love, healing, resolution, not violence or anger. And the way I came about this message, I was trying to figure out how to explain to people who aren't mediums or psychics how they can get the benefit of spirit communication. So I'm working on my computer and I was writing the afterlife frequency, and I got writer's block, which is terrible. I was saying, and it always happens on the day when you schedule the whole morning just to work on the book, and not a
Sure.
bongo, you know? So I go, all right, I'm going to go for a walk on the beach. And so I start heading down my driveway and I'm getting cold chills and tingles. Okay. That's electromagnetic activity. So I knew something was going on, and I got directed to go in the opposite direction. So I start walking down this bike path near my house. It's 11 in the morning, and I see these two objects glowing in the light. And I look at them, and it's a nickel and a penny. Okay. And I hear my mother's voice. It's bad luck if their head's down. And I start laughing because my mother's family is Italian, and there's a superstition for all occasions with the Italians. And then I hear my dad's voice. It's money, grab it. So I'm laughing, all right? So here I am, Peggy, and I've got this nickel and this penny. 6 cents. And I go, 6 cents. I go, okay, what do you tell me? What do you tell me? It tingles, and I see Dad standing in my mind's eye in the ocean holding this blue canvas raft. And I remember that raft that had like these yellow plastic, sides, and it was blue. And I knew raft. And then it dawned on me, I could hear them saying, teach people how to recognize signs from spirits, accept it as real, feel it without overthinking, and then trust the message. Ran back, the words just flew right out of me. And this applies not just to spirit communication through a medium or like that, but what if you have a visitation, a dream, or a loved one comes and talks to you? You just described one with your situation, okay? You recognized it, you accepted it, you felt it without overthinking it, and you trusted it, and you were right. See, Peggy, you do this automatically. And so for making sense of a deathbed vision, when you're around someone you love who's dying and you get caught up in that vibration, and maybe you see spirits of loved ones, or you get a sensation, or you actually see a flicker of light coming out of their body when they die, or if you have the visitation, or if you go to a medium and you receive information that you don't understand right away, the RAFT technique works right across the board. And see, I suspected, based on what you were telling me, that you acquired psychic abilities as a direct result of your NDE, and it's become part of who Peggy is. So you naturally apply the RAFT technique.
After the second NDE, it was crazy. I didn't know what was going on.
Well, it can be very, very unsettling. People think that we're making this up, that it's all hooey and all that, and it isn't. There's so much more to life than meets the eye.
Yeah. After the second NDE, it was just 2 months, and we were at a family reunion, and everybody was in line, big family reunion of people standing there looking at the food on the tables in line. And I said, do you hear a child crying? No, but no. I go to the line, do you hear it? No. And I end up in this field, and I just stood there. I'm like, I know, I heard a child crying. And I looked around, and then I saw a tall patch of grass. And I thought, well, that's stupid. There wouldn't be a child. And so I just said, no, go over there. And I went over, and this toddler was drowning in a ditch. He was face down. And I reached down and picked him up, and he looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. His water just flooding on his face, and he ran to his parents, and they were standing at the pavilion, and I could see him pointing out to me, and they're looking like, what are you talking about? And that was in 1986. And in 2010, I was working as a drug counselor, and I told that story for the first time because I recognized the client's last name. I said, because it happened at that family reunion. And he looked back at went back in his chair, and he looked at me, and he said, that was you? That was my brother. He says, my brother swears to this day that an angel saved him. He says, I can't wait to tell my mom. We know now who that was and what it was about. And but so that was like 2 months after that second NDE that happened. And then not long after that, like maybe a week or something, we're going down the road. My husband's driving, 3 little boys in the back seat. And all of a sudden I say, pull over. I've got to go in that house. I knock on the door, and I don't know who's going to be at this house. So I'm going to say, excuse me, I have the wrong house, but it was my ex-sister-in-law. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, I'm babysitting my sisters, son, her nephew, and I said, "Where's he at? Take me to him right now." I was just like led, and here he was in his bedroom choking on Easter basket grass. And I
Oh my
pulled the
God.
grass out of his throat, had him turned upside down and stuff. She said later, "Oh my gosh," she still says, he would have died if you hadn't been there, because she's kind of mentally disabled, wouldn't know what to do. And then not long after that, I heard a slight scuff noise, and I was like, "I got to go up the hill, got to see what that was." And my husband was like, time was like, "What?" He didn't hear that, but he was starting to listen. That like, something's going on with you. I'm going with her. He was starting to wonder too, what's going on. And went up, and there was a car wreck, and two guys' heads was laying on the dash. Their necks were broke, and two in the back were ejected and flown way down to the creek. And so at that point, I didn't know NDE, I didn't know after effects. I just knew what's going on. I did not connect it to the fact that I had died. It was just something was happening with me, and I was just feeling changed. And went back to school after 10 years being out of school. I went to college and became an investigator for children's services. And the first month I was there, I just got a reputation immediately because I just knew things. And people's like, they have no idea how I knew. I could get confessions really easy too.
So how many people's lives have you saved, Peggy? We got two little boys here. And then, of course,
the boy in the ditch, the boy at the Easter grass, there was 4 guys in that car. The 2 that was up front, their lives was saved because in the life flight come, and they died several times en route. And we were told for somebody on the squad that they were going to come thank us. I never did see them, but they were going to come thank us.
6 people so far, right?
Yeah. And then, I think my own son probably, the fire from the dream, hopefully that wouldn't have happened.
There's 7.
And then my son, a week before my second NDE, it was Easter Sunday. And we had bought property. We're standing on the spot where we're going to build a house, and our 3 little boys is playing. And the property has a creek, and I didn't worry about them because it's always been ankle deep. And I wasn't there long enough to realize that creek gets deep. We've had a lot of rain and melting snow, and I didn't think about that. And so they were that far away. They were down some way, a couple ball fields, I guess. And all of a sudden, our Matthew, a 6-year-old, cried, "Mom, Jeremy," in that shrill, no parent ever wants to hear. And my husband took off running. And I stood there frozen in fear and just started praying because I needed to be there right now, not the time it took my legs to get me there. And I started praying. And then all of a sudden, I'm out of my body. I am like between me and him in this space. And I'm now praying instead of God, I'm praying to my son that's drowning. And because I instinctively knew then in that space, I knew, oh, there's been a lot of rain and melting snow. That's why the creek is up, and he's fell in and he's drowned. And he's trying to swim instead of this, he could stand up and walk out of there. So I say to him in a prayer, "Jeremy, calm down. It's not that deep. Stand up, walk out of there." And so later, as I'm praying, I walk on slowly because I don't want to see my child dead. I refuse. And I even pray to God, take my twins. If you take a child of mine today, take my twins. Don't take my baby, Jeremy. I mean, I would not be good for the rest of my life if I lost that, if I lost my kids. And so then, as I say, that was in 1986. So that was a week before my tubal pregnancy. And then when Jeremy was 5, when Jeremy was 20, he had a New Year's Eve party. And I told that story for the first time to his friend, his cousin was standing there. And Jeremy heard me and he walked out. He says, "Mom, I heard you praying." He says, "That's what it was." He says, "I panicked. I was trying to swim instead of," and you told me, "Jeremy, calm down, stand up, walk out of there." And everybody in the room's mouths just like, "Oh," and I just stood there and I'm thinking, that started my quest of what's going on. This stuff isn't in my head. I'm not mentally ill. This stuff did happen.
No, Peggy,
what is going on?
Yeah, what's going on? Think about all the lives that you have saved, and see, you were given a choice in an NDE, and they said, "Well, you're going to go," and you said, "No, I'm not," because you were given the choice. Okay, you could have gone, or you could have come back, and you came back. And think of those at least 7, probably 8 or more lives that you've saved. Since it's this time of year, we've all seen It's a Wonderful Life. Okay, the whole part, where, every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings, and Jimmy, your kids marry, we've all seen that. But the basic premise of that is he thought that he didn't amount to anything. His life was just mundane. He said, I wish I'd never died. And the angel showed him what his life had been like if he hadn't died. And he saw the grave of his brother. And he goes, but my brother was a war hero. And he saved 22 men on a troop transport from drowning. And the angel said, but you weren't there to save him from drowning when he was 10 years old. And then the whole town, of course, the evil Mr. Potter. Actually, it's funny because it looked like Mr. Potter turned the town. They had gambling, casinos, restaurants. It actually looked like it was fun. I'm kidding. But the thing is, the basic premise of that story and why it's an enduring Christmas story and universal story is how one life affects so many others. If you had agreed to transition, at least 7 or 8 people would be dead right now. And we don't know what effect those people have in turn had on other people. So this goes back to another thing that we learn in NDEs is interconnectedness. Yes, we go back to the quantum electromagnetic level, that everything is energetically linked. Yes, and that includes us with each other. When we hear that we're all the children of God and that we're created in God's image, I doubt that God is a high order bipedal primate. Okay, God's energy, we're energy, and we are all brothers and sisters. Gandhi said something really beautiful once. He said a lot of really nice things, but there was Hindus and Muslims were on the verge of violence. There's always a clash between religions. And he said, we're all the children of God. Why do you raise your hands against your brothers and sisters? Simply because they call God by another name. And NDEs teach us that. It also taught you how you're part of a mosaic, a very complex puzzle. And if that Pegi piece had been removed, many more pieces would have fallen. So I think that's wonderful, the way you have shared that experience so that everybody can understand this. And what everybody needs to realize is that we're all significant. Everybody matters. Everybody counts. Pegi and I are blessed because, we've been shown how our lives affect other lives. And I'm not waving my flag or anything like this. But a lot of people think, I don't matter. I don't count. Do you? What if somebody who feels that he or she doesn't matter is sitting on a bus, okay? The proverbial stranger on a bus, and somebody comes and sits next to you and they look very despondent and depressed and they begin to tell you about their life, and you actually listen and you validate them. You don't tell them what to do with their lives, but you give that person the time of day. And maybe that person goes home and doesn't take a gun to his or her head, because for once in their life, they felt that somebody mattered, made them feel like they mattered. So we never know how much we impact other people. What if all the great teachers, Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, Yogananda Paramahansa, Gandhi, what if they all taught us? Be nice, right? Be nice. That's easy to go around and say, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Easy to say that, isn't it? It's when we're actually doing it. And that's how people like Jesus, like Buddha, have raised that bar so high. And NDEs show us that we're all interconnected, and that's why we have to raise that bar so high. It was fascinating. A couple of weeks back when William Shatner, aka Captain Kirk, went up in the blue horizon, and he came back, and I watched this on TV, and he was in tears. And he said, it was so beautiful, but so fragile, this thin blue layer around our world. And you look at our Earth and its life, and then you look into space and its death. I've had conversations with Neil Armstrong, the first man to set foot on the moon, with Buzz Aldrin, the second man to set foot on the moon, John Glenn, the first man to go around to orbit the Earth, Captain Mike Foreman, who was a shuttle pilot and a space shuttle pilot, and Bill Nelson, who's actually the head of NASA now. But John Glenn, I mean, it was great meeting Neil Armstrong. I mean, I was just like shaking. I was only 17 and I couldn't believe it. Oh my God, here's Neil Armstrong. Because I've met a lot of celebrities in my life, and people say, well, who's the most impressive? I don't know, Neil Armstrong, first guy on the moon. But I was fortunate because I got to talk to John Glenn one-on-one for about 20 minutes. And I said, what was it like? He said, Mark, it's so beautiful when you're looking down and you see how alive Earth is. He said, and then it dawns on you, this is the only place we have to live. I wish we could get every politician in the world and send them up to space for a couple minutes.
Mark, I saw that without a spaceship. When I was 16, I was kidnapped. And just before the guy was coming over to rape me, I was praying, God, I wish I wouldn't on this earth. And suddenly I was in the night sky among the twinkling stars looking down at Earth. Weightless. I had my body, my long brown hair I had at the time was real tiny, skinny, and my hair was blowing. It was, the wind was like, and the warmth was like when you're at the beach, that feeling of bliss. And I was safe. And I looked down at Earth, and it looks just like you see it in your science class, the globe. And I was looking down, and and I didn't understand, because I know nothing about science. I'm not a smart, educated person when it comes to that kind of stuff. I like slept through school, but I'm in this dark sky, and the twinkling stars is like all around me, behind me, everywhere. And there's like a light is behind me or something, but Earth is glowing. And I told my husband this, I know nothing about science, but why is the Earth glowing? When it's dark outside, we think everything's dark, I said, but the Earth was glowing. You could just see the blue and the whites and all the shades. And he explained to me where I could understand, why the Earth would glow like that. I said, I wouldn't have known that. It wasn't made up in my head. It wasn't imagination. I'm telling you, God rescued me. When I prayed, God, I wish I wasn't even on this earth. Nobody loves me, and now they're going to hate me for what is about to happen. I mean, my grandparents, my parents, everybody's just going to hate me. They're going to blame me for this. And I was out there, and I did not need a spaceship, and I saw it. I felt that, and I'll never forget it.
And that's exactly my point. This is the only place we have to live. We're all brothers and sisters. We're all interconnected. Now, does that mean we're all going to join hands and sing Kumbaya? No, because that's not the nature of humans. But it would be nice if we would start thinking in those terms. And that's one of the things that NDEs do teach us, is that we're all interconnected. We are all energy, and we're all linked, and we're all part of something much greater than ourselves. So we really need to not trash the only place that we have to live.
Well, I think that where we all need to start is our news. Our news media is causing this. They're causing us to hate each other and fear each other and despise each other. And they're causing all of this to happen. It's coming from our news media. It's my opinion, because I'm always right. but
anyway. Well, I try to avoid politics. It's hard. It's hard sometimes, but, the thing is, the beautiful thing about our society, and this is how I learned about free speech. And I'm giving away a story in the introduction of my new book, Afterlife, the Afterlife Frequency. I was a student, and I was in Russia, and I was part of an exchange group, and we're over there, and they're always trying to impress us with the biggest building here, most impressive scientific exploration here, and we had this guide. And we called him my friends and I, we're a bunch of smart alecky teenagers, and we called him the product of the state, because he was a member of Communist Party, and And so he's going on, and we're in this class, and he said that the teachings of Lenin, Karl Marx and then Lenin, are the highest form of philosophical thought ever achieved by a human being. And I'm like, okay, hold on. I raised my hand. Everyone's like, Mark. I said, all right, so what you're telling me is that the highest form of philosophical thought ever achieved by a human brain is boring economic theory? Is that what you're telling me? Oh, and I can see this guy, he was like 27, here I'm some smart alecky 17-year-old. I can see him like turning purple in the face. And he walks over to where I'm sitting. I'm like, uh-oh. And he puts his hands on either side of the desk and he leans over and he says, "It is not wise to criticize Russia." And I said, yeah, but, okay. Yeah, but didn't you also tell us that the Russian Constitution has, and I mimicked his accent, free speech, just like American Constitution? And he leans in and I can feel him breathing on me and he goes, "The difference between Russian Constitution and American Constitution is not freedom of speech, but freedom after you make speech." And then it dawned on me what he was telling me. And I was like, I learned a lot that day. And I also learned how precious and how valuable our rights were. And I didn't include this because I needed to keep the story shorter. But 2 days later, when I was at the airport, we're in Moscow International Airport, and we're getting ready to leave, and I'm there in line, and I'm joking around with my friends, and I remember this woman in a uniform walks up, looks me up and down, and goes, "That one." And they grabbed me, and Russian security forces, they pulled me in this room, strip searched me, went through everything I had. They were implying I was a spy. I was terrified. I knew now I know that they were just having some fun with me, but for some reason, they targeted me. And I have a feeling that the product of the state had something to do with that.
Well, what you just said, he was telling you, you're going to jail.
Yeah. Don't criticize, Russia. And, it's funny because a lot of people in the New Agey field, they say, oh, all fear is bad. All love is good. Fear is false evidence appearing real. Let me tell you something. Having a healthy fear of sticking your hand in a bucket full of rattlesnakes is a very wise thing. Yeah. Falling in love with a narcissistic sociopath is not a good thing. And standing up in Red Square in Moscow and saying what you really think about Vladimir Putin, not a good idea. Okay. So the thing is, our rights are so precious. Our freedom of speech, our freedom of belief, and our freedom from belief. Because there's people that if they could, they would turn our government into an extension of a religion. Well, that never works very well.
Do you think so?
Do you want to live in Iran?
I mean, you think that? You think that they're trying to...
I think that there are extremist elements that would do that on one side, and I think there are extremist elements on the other side that would be imposing a Marxist-Leninist thing. America's the great experiment. We're sort of in between extremes, all right? And that's why we have to maintain our freedoms. Because I've had people saying, well, we need to get prayer in school. I say, okay, so we do the Hindu prayer to Ganesha. What? I go, well, who decides? Whose prayers? Do we do Muslim prayers? Do we do Hindu prayers? Do we do Christian prayers? What prayers do we have? And the thing is, it is important for us to not have the government tell us what to believe, what to think, and what to say. That's the essence of freedom. I learned that visit to Russia. And I will say this, Russia is a beautiful country. I thoroughly enjoyed the Russian people, their culture, their art, their literature. Not a big fan of the government, okay? So, and it's the same thing with Iran. Okay, it's a theocracy run by religious fanatics. But look at the contributions. Iran used to be called Persia. I mean, Persian rugs, Persian art, the literature. I mean, Persia is such a deep and rich culture. Their advancements in science, in mathematics, in astronomy, the Magi, the three wise men, came from Persia because they were observing astrological phenomena. That's a whole nother, that we could do a whole show just on that one. But the thing is, we live in a democracy and our rights are fragile. And I remember hearing somebody say something, I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend with my life your right to say it. You don't hear that. You don't hear that in Russia.
I will say that I think the New Age movement, if you want to call it that, is afraid of religion. I don't think religion is the problem. Religion's always been there, but I think it's the New Age fear of religion that's causing the problem, which I think is probably contradictory to what they think. They think that the religious are going to infringe their judgment on everyone, so we have to get rid of religion so we won't be infringed. I think that's a fear. And it seems to me like, I could be wrong, that Christians are the ones being asked to understand the Muslims and the atheists and the Jewish and what other religions, but I do not think anybody asked those religions to understand a Christian religion.
Okay.
That's my feeling. That's my feeling.
There you go. And see, and you have an absolute right to your feelings. And see, that's what my point is. You have the right to say that and should not ever be afraid of the government to say something like that. Because I was just joking around in a politics class in Russia, and I ended up getting detained, and questioned. So that's why
my fear is that we're going towards that here.
Well, that's always been the fear, isn't it? I mean,
but now with everything's turned upside down because of pandemic, we can do this now. We can do that. Like,
all right, hold on. Anything we want. Near-death experiences into politics. My point is that we have a right to a belief system, and also with near-death experiences, they teach us things that far exceed anything that's going on in this planet or any political system. So anyway, it's been a pleasure to be on your show, Peggy.
Thank you. We've been talking quite a while.
Yeah, we have. All right. So if people want to find out more about me and the work that I do, please visit my website, afterlifefrequency.com. I invite you to sign up for my newsletter. If you're interested in scheduling a session with me or finding out about my show, which is every Thursday, The Psychic in the Doc on the Transformation Network, please visit my website, the Afterlife Frequency, or afterlifefrequency.com. And Peggy, once again, thank you so much for having me on. Many blessings.
Thank you for coming on. Bye-bye.